So today I just wanted to take a quick look at the 1979 Christmas horror film Christmas Evil, the catalyst that makes the person, or the aggressor, or the person who witnessed these events into who they are. So essentially, basically creating a monster, which I find very interesting because the young boy in this film, obviously, to some degree, his mother, I'm assuming she's a single parent, has a man come over to the home dressed as Santa. He's pretending to, play the part, dropping off gifts, whatnot. And later that evening, one of the young boys discovers that mom is having a bit of her own unwrapping with Santa. So to some degree, I guess you could say this event did traumatize the boy. It's obviously not a scene in which he walked in on his parents, which, is one of those coming-of-age moments that most children go through, is, peeping on their parents. But he catches her with someone else who is supposedly the Santa cat, and it basically just ruins this kid for his life, supposedly. So he grows up to become a Christmas-obsessed person. Why, I don't know, but he keeps a list of good children, bad children, keeps down little notes of what they do. So he's basically running around peeping on people's lives. And he's very much a wannabe Santa. So one day he basically just snaps and takes it upon himself to, I guess you could say, hand out his own sort of Christmas justice, if you will. But I found it very interesting. When preparing for this film, it was writer-director Lewis Jackson who had supposedly spent 10 years collecting the various Christmas items that you see around the lead character's home. So everything in this guy's house is literally Christmas themed, decorated, blah, blah, blah. So apparently it took 10 years to collect all of that crap. It took slightly over that time just to actually get this film off the ground and moving. So supposedly the whole premise of this film is the fact that the writer-director one day was just sitting around smoking the Mary and had a vision of a Santa holding a knife, which, that would totally inspire just about anyone to create a film, Considering that day and age, I suppose you could say the whole concept of the bad or the evil Santa was still very much a new concept that really hadn't been explored too much. Of course, nowadays we have Krampus and, he has his own cult following, but basically you could pretty much say within the 70s, this genre type film was the beginning. But supposedly it was due to the fact that John Carpenter's Halloween was such a great success that studios actually considered looking at and producing this film. So pretty much that was one of the main things also holding this film back, is the fact that I guess there was nothing comparable that was considered successful, so no one was really willing to take that big a gamble on a holiday horror film. But obviously Halloween pretty much just opened the door for this. So as previously stated, for some odd reason this year this nutter just goes off his rocker and he decides to play Santa. He creates his own little, I guess you could say, customized costume, and he steals toys from the toy factory that he works at. He donates them to a hospital, and he has a rather shaky start because he does seem a bit unnerving. He even sits around outside just practicing his Merry Christmas and ho-ho nonsense. But it's actually as the hospital staff is coming out and they're greeting him and picking up the gifts that he becomes a lot more jolly. He, I guess you could say, slips into the role more easily and he becomes a lot more convincing. But it's that shakiness between the fact that you don't know where you stand with him. At times, yes, he is unnerving and he comes off as creepy, and at other times just very warm and gentle. But it's very much like flipping a switch with this guy. You just really don't know what to expect or on which end of the spectrum you stand, because obviously he's not going to tell you. You're just going to find out as you go. But, you know, definitely very interesting. And I think that's part of what makes the character more effective. It's the fact that he pretty much does not make his intentions known until last minute. And to me, what really makes this evident is the one scene where he visits the Christmas party. He's just kind of creeping around outside the window. He's invited in to join in, and he very much plays the role of the Santa Claus extremely well. The children towards, you know, his party are just kind of sad to see him go. He gives them some gifts, and then, you know, he kind of gives them this lecture about being good boys and girls, but he ends with this rather creepy note that if you're not good, you know, the whole "or else I'll bring you something very unpleasant." And that just kind of leaves people like, what is wrong with this guy? So I guess you could say it's due to the fact that he's so enthusiastic at work, which is primarily the reason why he's singled out at work. People just kind of walk all over him. He's the human doormat. And he isn't displeased with his employers. Later, after the Christmas party, he makes his way over to a church where some people just kind of go out of their way to make fun of him. Why? I don't know. It's the freaking holiday. People dress as Santa. I mean, during that time period, that would be considered acceptable. If he were dressed that way in the middle of August, okay, I can see the reason why someone would feel the need to mock him, but he is within season. But obviously a group of people just decide to go out of their way and, you know, act, you know, like a bunch of turd stompers, basically. So, you know, they get their comeuppance, and this is roughly, if I'm remembering correctly, around 40 minutes into the film. So it's our first kill scene, but we have all of this time of character development, which to me is the very first time that we actually see what he is actually capable of, which makes the whole thing a lot more unnerving and convincing, because you've had the underlining tones of his creepiness, but here you're actually seeing him in action. It's not an all-out gore scene, it's not extremely violent, but it is effective because we have those undertones. We've already had a taste of what he is and what he's capable of. And I think it's a very tasteful and it's a very effective scene. Tasteful in the sense that you don't have an all-out bloodbath, but yes, you do have some gore. So I apologize, I partially misquoted that. So that kill scene comes in at the 51-minute mark, and this movie is roughly an hour and 34 minutes, but you know, it's not too bad a wait, especially because, like I've said, you definitely have great character development going on. You've got atmosphere, you've got tension, so it's definitely pushing you along. And especially for this type of film, you really don't see too much of that stuff too often. A lot of the holiday horror films, in my experience, have been just very cheesy, they're very bland. And for the longest time I didn't care for them, but it's movies like this that actually make me want to appreciate and further explore the genre. It's also the ending where basically after this kill scene everything just kind of keeps rolling downhill. So you definitely do have a scene where he is spotted by some children, he gives them some gifts, and by this point in time everyone is aware that there's a psycho Santa on the loose. The kids' parents come around the corner and they're fearful for their children's life, which I guess you could say is understandable, but also stupid, because nowhere has there been reported a child murder, but you know, they're, I guess you could say, just being cautious. So they, essentially the adults provoke the guy. He does manage to get away, and here is where the film to me just feels very much like it's referencing a universal classic horror film, because you have adults who grab torches and they are literally chasing him down the street, just trying to administer their own justice. And it very much feels like something out of a Frankenstein film. So obviously this was my first time watching the film, and looking at some of the background at the movie, the director himself actually cites Frankenstein as having been an inspiration for the film. So I definitely found that very interesting, because that's the way that one particular scene read to me. But yes, this is basically a man who was essentially made into a monster, not necessarily purposely, but you know, events and things that happen throughout a person's life, not just as a child, but as an adult, continue to mold and shape a person, unfortunately. So the ending sequence of this I absolutely love because it carries out and it follows along with his Santa delusion. Is, of course, you have Psycho Santa driving over the side of a bridge, I believe, and you see him just, the screenshot just kind of goes into slow motion. You have this very theatrical music coming up, and for a split second with the sleigh painted onto the side of his white van, it literally does look like he's just flying through the air, and that he has finally met his fantasy, his delusion, basically. You know, in that glimmering moment, he actually is Santa, not a Santa. So it's kind of like just a very split, brief moment of joy, but it definitely does follow with theme of the film as well, because we do know he's unhinged and he's basically just, you know, playing out this Santa fantasy, and it very much goes along with his delusion. Obviously, it's a no-brainer what does happen, but to some degree, I guess if you want to be an optimist or whatever, you can make up your own ending. But I think in a horror film, that's actually one of the most beautiful and well executed scenes that I have ever seen. Very excellent. And if it's your first time watching, definitely the ending sequence is very much well worth it. But that is all I have for you guys today, and I will talk to you later.